Hi, I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've made radical changes in their lives for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Whitney Vosburgh, and he has an awesome story to share with us. So without further ado, Whitney, take it away.
Thank you. A few years ago, I asked my wife, what is it that you most admire about me? I'm not looking for flattery, I'm looking for honesty. She said, your ability to constantly reinvent yourself. And also a few years ago, my eldest daughter said to me, you know, Dad, you live your life the way you want it. And I want to live mine like yours.
I hear motivation coming.
I was born curious. I always wanted to know why. Not so much what or when or where, who somewhat, or how much, but why. It was always the burning question for me. I didn't know why I was that way. My father's American, my mother's Dutch, and my dad worked for Pan American Airways. So it took us from an early age from New York to Tokyo to The Hague, where my mother's from, and on to London. So I spent 14 out of my first 20 years abroad. So moving, new languages, new cultures, new religions, new ways of seeing, being, and doing. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I figured out, oh, I am me, and home is where I happen to be, like a turtle. My father, classic corporate executive. It was important to him who his name was associated in terms of big brand marquee names. And he always said to me, you know, you have to get a good job with large corporations and live with, you know, be with them for life, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that that wasn't for me. It didn't make sense to me. As it turns out that many years later, he came around to my way of thinking saying, you know, you're right. That was BS. So as a young man, I was angry, rebellious, and without a cause. I knew I was that the sort of the top-down patriarchal, never mind, we know what's better for you, sort of top-down approach. Just didn't make sense. So much in the world didn't make sense. Growing up in the Vietnam era and seeing Nixon resign, Watergate. So I just grew up as a part of a generation that didn't trust the man, the establishment, the power structure. And the world around me didn't make sense. So I was against the ruling paradigm of the day, which was fully cemented in the 80s and is with us to this day. Mm-hmm. What we're experiencing now all has the seeds as a reaction to, in the 80s, to what happened in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. There's a huge wave that's cresting and coming to crash down on us, which will sweep away much of that. But we're not there yet. And whether it's for the better or for the worse, in the short run, I do not know. These are very interesting times, putting it mildly. So I tried many things because I was curious. So I studied accounting, worked in accounting, and then put myself through art school as a junior accountant. And from art school, I became a graphic designer, art director, creative director. And then I shifted over to brand strategy. So I was asking myself, what is it that I can do now, and even if I have to fake it till I make it, that will be more interesting, give me more respect, means I'll have more control and make me more money in less time. Everything I've done in life has been project oriented. So it's 3 months, 6 months, it's art, travel, family time, work, research, contemplation. I can't overestimate the value of meditative practices. It doesn't have to be meditation itself, taking regular walks in nature, journaling, making art, gardening, cooking, volunteering, whatever it is that helps you get away from the monkey mind and into more of sort of a heart-centered existence, really is a grounding, a superb grounding experience and foundation on which to build a true life. Because we want to be human beings, not human doings.
Yes.
And at an even higher level, we are ideally human becomings. What we were yesterday is not what we are today. What we are today is not necessarily what we will be tomorrow. Because after all, we are constantly changing, as is the world around us and within us. Our cells are changed completely every X many months, less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
So we are literally new people, newer people every day.
Yes.
In fact, all the time. It changes constant, or as my co-author, Charlie, likes to say, shift happens.
Yep. Yep.
Love that expression. So, I've lived in many different, both as a child as well as an adult. I've lived, studied, worked, traveled to many different places, cultures, languages. I've studied many different languages, although I'm not good at languages. It gives me a clue as to what the culture is like.
Absolutely.
I'm currently learning Italian. And before that was Spanish and French and Vietnamese and Dutch and Chinese and Japanese. Do I speak any of them well? No, but it's fun. It's the act and the art of trying new things, of coming back to what's known in Zen as beginner's mind,
Mm-hmm.
approaching things as if for the first time. It's hard, but like any muscle, the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets.
Right. Right.
So it's just, I had a design professor years ago say, try doing something simple, differently every day. And if you're right-handed, brush your teeth with your left hand one night. Things along those lines. So be different, try different, think different, feel different. Because things are always going to be different. And the most important in life is, how do I and the people around me who count, my community, how do we make a difference?
Right. Right.
Because we are all born with a unique gift or gifts to share with the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we need to start with our purpose, which is like our head, and then move on to our passion, which is our heart, and then move out to our hands, which is to help us put it into practice. So it's, what is my unique gift? With whom do I share it with? And then how and when and where do I share it with? So you got to go from purpose to place or passion onto practice. So then I became a brand strategist, and then I became a interim VP of marketing and a chief marketing officer for Silicon Valley startups. And then I moved on to mid-sized companies, and then ultimately on to Fortune 20 companies. The difference is every organization, no matter how big or small, has more in common than not.
Yep.
And so by always looking at what is the common thread, or as they say in Europe, the red I forget, it's called the red something, the red thread. It's that which has as continuity through your entire life. What is that you do, you think, you say, you feel, you manifest? What is the common link? And for me, it's always about asking bigger and better whys. Why are we here? Why are we here now in terms of what gift are we to share and with whom? But it's all based on why. So I'm just trying to get, I've been going to night class, for example, for 40 years plus. I continue to do so today. I love learning new things. I love doing new things that challenge me. Doesn't mean I like getting better at things that I'm already good at, but I also, even more so, like learning new things, trying new things. Not so much for the sake of it, but for the experience of being a beginner, of not knowing, of having this great challenge ahead of me. And you intuitively develop a sense of whether you can actually do it or not long before you even try it. Mm-hmm. So, it's all about, key point is, so until I was 40, I was against a lot of stuff. But when I hit 40, I looked in the mirror and said, okay, so what are you for? Instead of being reactive, why not be proactive? What do you stand for? What's important to you? And what are you going to do about it? So I started doing a long, deep search, which led me to, through many different adventures, experiences, what have you, to find out what was my soul's desire. Is one has to listen very carefully to hear the very quiet yearnings of one's soul to bubble up, because we're so busy doing. We don't spend enough time being quiet with ourselves and listening to our inner yearnings. So it's earnings are great. Learnings are so much more important about ourselves, about the world, our place in the world. So I've very much spent the last 20 years exploring what is it that is important to me and what can I do about it. And like you, I'm very fascinated by human potential. Each and every person has a completely unique path in life. We are not like anyone currently who exists or ever will be or whoever has been. We are unique. So there is only one unique life path for each person. Nobody, and I mean nobody, can tell anybody what their life path should be. They can say, these are my lessons learned. They may apply or not. Take as you wish, reject as you wish, and I hope it helps.
That is very wisely said. I like that very much. So let me ask you, 40, you went from reactive to proactive.
Yes.
What was the trigger, or what was the thought process, or what happened that made you reflect on that and then make that shift in your mind?
Middle age.
The ability to look back and look forward at the same time.
That's right.
Yep. Nope. I hear you on that one.
Foresight.
I'm sorry.
Hindsight and foresight.
Yes. Yeah, you do hit a point where you're kind of sitting there on the balance and you can all of a sudden realize, yeah, I can see behind me, and I really can see a ways behind me now, but I still see a big future ahead. So you've had a really interesting path in life to be able to go country to country and learn different languages, go to school in different places. What's the biggest difference you see between Americans and non-Americans? that you've experienced, do you see that Americans in some way have any type of unique qualities, or good or bad, that set us apart from the rest of the world, or are we just pretty much like the rest of the world?
At a basic level, all people are more similar than not.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get beyond the basics, Americans are very different from most people from other countries. But you have to remember there are many different Americas. There's not just one. America is not a single massive entity. I read a book recently which states that America actually is 11 different cultural nations.
I think I saw an article on that book, and then some infographics that were actually drawing that out. So I've heard that before. So let me actually shift back to you. As you were growing up, what was the story that you heard? You heard the story from your father. Go to school, become the, in essence, follow my path, is what it kind of sounds like your father was saying to you.
Yes.
Was that reinforced other places in your life too, by other people other than your father?
Oh yes, it's the culture. It's the air that we breathe. It's something that we exist in. We move through. We breathe it, but it's odorless. Almost intangible. So it's sort of it's there. It's around us, all around us. It's in us. In terms of modeling, media, memes and themes, what have you. My mother is an artist, and her mother was an artist, and her grandfather was an artist. So on that side of the family, art was a family business. To me, art was something that everybody did. I didn't realize that until I grew up that, it can actually be a profession. Whereas my father's line are businessmen. So I grew up with, one eye on art, one eye on business. And I always believed that business can be an art, and that there's the business of art as well. Right. So I've always been fascinated and comfortable with embracing change, ambiguity, and possibility.
Mm-hmm. So how did that manifest in you as you grew up? That you kind of saw a dichotomous world in some ways. I mean, art and business are separate for many people, but you saw them more combined. What did that do as you grew up? Did it give you more opportunities where you didn't draw those lines that so many people do?
Well, I from a very early age, always stubbornly, persistently followed the beat of my own drum, listened to it and followed it. I couldn't articulate for a long time what that beat was and why and how and all those other important questions. But I always knew that my way, for me, was so much more important than anything else that I heard actively or passively, or experienced or saw modeled. I knew that I didn't have the answers, but I also knew that nobody else had the answers.
Sure. So what did that, as a young person and as a young man, you had that beat, but you didn't feel like you could articulate it. How did that then manifest it in your thinking? Was it, I'm driven to go in this direction, but I don't know why, or how was it manifested in your thinking and then what you ultimately were doing?
Well, I was interested in creativity, art and design and aesthetics, self-expression, self-exploration. So I did it. I was interested in travel, so I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in working in many different environments. So my entire life, I've been been a freelancer, an independent, a consultant, self-employed, whatever. The longest job I ever had was 1 year and 1 day. Why? Because my then wife made me bet I couldn't last more than a year. So what?
So you won the bet.
I won the bet.
Okay, so then someplace something changed where you felt more connected to that drum beat, where you were actually able to begin to articulate that. What was it that enabled you to do that? To become more connected to your own drum beat, or I think you had your soul's desire was the term you used.
When I was 37, I got divorced a second time. And so I was 37 and realized that it was a watershed. I intuitively, one thing I learned very early on that when I don't listen to my intuition, I pay a very heavy penalty. And so I've learned to not only listen, but trust my intuition. Not blindly, but certainly listen to it and trust it as a source of direction. And then I'll qualify it intellectually thereafter. It was 2 marriages, 2 kids, 37. I knew I was going to leave New York, where I'd been for 16 years. I started planning to come out to California, where I've been for over 20 years now. I started therapy. All kinds of formal, informal therapies, solo, group. One of the best things I've ever done. In certain parts of American society, there's this sort of taboo about therapy. It's one of the best things ever invented in the 20th century, provided you're ready for it and the provider is good at it, at the very least, because most therapists are not good.
It's very much like taking your car to a mechanic.
Yes, but except when you're the car, it can literally be life-saving or
the end.
Or fatal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you went through this process and you became more connected to that drum beat. What?
To my feelings.
To your feelings.
To my soul.
How did that manifest itself in the way you lived your life? Did it change things for you?
Yes, I started from my late 30s into my early 40s. I started the transition, the middle age passage, the metamorphosis, going from this into that, is going, from being reactive to proactive, to being more connected with my feelings, my soul, crystallizing my values, what I value, what is it I wanted to do in my life, as opposed to what I did not want to do in or with my life. So it's like branding. It's taking a stick, putting it in the ground relative to others. This is what I stand for. Therefore, this is what I don't stand for. It's taking a stand and being public, privately secure, and publicly sharing of this is me at this time, and this is my true self at this time, and these are hints of my aspirational higher self.
Very cool. So how did that then change the way you felt about yourself?
Even more curious.
Ah, very cool.
And devoted to following my muse, my passion, the yearnings of my soul, which is like an onion. Once you start peeling one layer, there's especially when it's a big juicy onion, it takes a long time to get down to the sweet core. In fact, you never do,
Right.
because it grows faster than you can peel it.
Absolutely. That very interesting. So how is you started out talking a little bit about uh, meditative experience, be
Mm-hmm.
that true meditation, into nature. How is that played into this role of going from the rebellious youth to, the more proactive older adult? I realize that line's mid-40s, but how did that meditate? How have you changed your practices of whatever the meditative experiences are for you, and how do those kind of manifest themselves in your life today?
Well, I recognize 40 for being what it was for me in particular, and for many people in general. Um, so I moved from New York to Berkeley, started meditating, started yoga, started exercising more, started exploring the great outdoors, whether it was camping or hiking. Uh, uh, Took 7 years off to pursue a fine arts career, which I had a great run, but decided I wasn't interested in creating merchandise to be hung in a store for sale. And that it was more of a spiritual practice, and that if I made something, I'd rather give it to someone as a gift as opposed to selling it.
Right.
And continued going to school all this time, started journaling, going to therapy when it's appropriate. One thing I found out years ago when I first was looking into therapy was a friend of mine said, hey, because I said, basically, I'm looking for a life coach. And a good friend of mine said, well, that's great. Athletes have coaches, performers have coaches. Why not people?
Mm-hmm.
So I have worked with individuals, therapists, life coaches, and whatever, even lawyers or doctors. I look to them to be my partner in helping me develop better life practices
Mm-hmm.
and points of view, and to question things that I know are not fully formed or baked, but I don't know exactly in what aspects. And they can help me see the trees for the forest.
Sure.
Uh, and so, again, I always continue to ask, how can I do more interesting work that earns me more respect, gives me more clout, earns me more money, less time? And how can I translate that into something yet more interesting, richer, more promising, more rewarding? And then I hit 50, and by then my kids had grown up, moved out. Again, look in the mirror and say, who are you? And I said to myself, good question. And in my early 50s, I felt like as if the carpet had been pulled out under my feet. I had many questions, that many more questions, existential questions, than answers, which eventually led me to the fact that I wanted to write a book. I wanted to go back to school to help me write the thesis, which would be turned into a book. So I
Mm-hmm.
did that. I looked at getting an MBA, decided, nah, this is more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at art school, MBA, MFA, I thought, or hybrid programs. Decided that wasn't for me. So I decided to go to divinity school, just up the block from me, 2 blocks here in Berkeley. And I got a degree in social change, wrote a thesis called Second Act, Creating a Meaningful Middle Age and Beyond. Did extensive qualitative and some quantitative research into the mindset, the heart set of the middle age passage, and then how to thrive in middle age and beyond. Fascinating project. Came out, my interest is very much in community in my second half of my life, and didn't it turned the thesis into a book. Started a new business, and then I met my writing partner, thought partner, and we just clicked and wrote one book, released it last year, coming out with a second book in January. It's all about what we're discussing today, not only for the individuals, but for their communities as well as for the organizations, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, communal, civic, or otherwise. Because at the end of the day, it's not about scale. It's about the quest for purpose, finding meaning through following one's purpose, having a sense of passion about what one is pursuing, knowing what one values, what one's principles are, and all that.
Very cool. So if somebody wanted to know a little bit more about you, what's the best way for them to go about? I mean, you've talked a little bit about your work here. What's the best way for them to find out about you?
You can look me up on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's the best way? Very cool. I always like to make sure that I let people say that in the interview, and for somebody who's listening, go look Whitney Vosburgh up on LinkedIn.
Right, and also the website for the two books and our consulting practice. It's called workthefuture.today.
Workthefuture.today. And we'll make sure that that's up on the website too with this interview. So as you've worked with people through the years, you've helped a lot of people transition their lives, their organizations. Let me focus back on individual people. When people are on a path where they want to change in a different direction, what type of advice do you give?
It's more about questions that I ask. Do you have a meditative practice? If not, why not? What's your life plan? What are your unique gifts?
Cool.
What makes you feel alive, electric, excited, jazzed? What would you do if you could do anything? If money was no object? There are many other questions, but those are some of them. And one thing I always recommend is take a piece of paper, take a quiet hour or two alone, and write down everything you've ever done, particularly in terms of your work, whether it's paid or unpaid, volunteer or organizational or what have you, odd jobs that you did as a kid, and then look for the common thread. And then you can do it in terms of your hobbies, your passions, your activities, your interests. Because those both will give you trends, patterns, and clues as to what you're about.
Very cool. That's an interesting way to go about getting to those things. I like that. So if you had the opportunity, now that you've gone to divinity school, you've gone through an amazing process of living your life. Two questions. If you could go back to that young man who was a little bit on the rebellious side when he was younger, question number one, would you give him any advice? And question number two, if you would give him any advice for his path, what would it be?
I wouldn't have listened.
So many of us answer that way. So, the advice wouldn't be worth giving. No, I totally hear you. It's interesting because some people are very introspective about what they wish they knew, but a lot of people then, even if they know what they would like to tell their younger self, they realize that person wasn't going to listen anyway. They needed to go down the path they were on.
No.
Very, very cool. Well, Whitney, this has been very interesting talking with you today. I'm very excited about the work you're doing. Um, and I hope that you have wonderful success as you head down whatever path you head down, which I have a feeling may go in multiple ways for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So thank you for your time today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed our conversation.